Right? I mean, this is really about the organization that we live within, and how do we rethink that organization. I don't know if you're familiar with Roberto Ibarra's work. Roberto did this wonderful book called Beyond Affirmative Action. It's a terrible title for a wonderful book. So there's a metaphor that he uses in the book. He said, so, you know, in one way that we've approached diversity and inclusion, we've said, here's the front door, you're welcome in. Okay? And that was sort of one approach. And then he said another approach was that we said, you can come on and you can have this room over here. Okay? And that's another, and it goes to sort of what you're saying. But then he said another way to think about it is that let's build this house together. And we'll just rebuild the house and see what we come up with together as a different way of thinking about what does it mean to really focus on diversity and inclusion. I think that's more what we're talking about here, but it goes back to that question of organization and transformation. Yeah.
I was just going to say that was a very valid, that what you just said made perfect sense with regard to the distinction between assimilating and including, but that just really underscores how the way of thinking from the university is so embedded, you know what I mean, in their mind. They would want them to assimilate as opposed to just embracing them for who they are and changing the thinking. But I just wanted to ask you a quick question. Is there a deliberate approach for educators to be trained up in this way of thinking?
All right, so great question. So one of the problems, you could look at it this way, is that we need to do something to change the pipeline, right? Because otherwise we're just going to simply continue to socialize early career academics into exactly the same systems again, and then reproduce them, and then be exactly where we are now, trying to figure out how to get them out of it, right? But again, what's happening in graduate education are shifts which say that we're paying more attention to this kind of community engaged work as part of the graduate training and socialization of what will become future academics. And I could, again, point a lot of places here. So there's an organization called Imagining America around public engagement in the arts, humanities, and design, and they have this incredibly robust group of graduate students called PAGE, the PAGE Program, Publicly Active Graduate Education. There's an organization called the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement, and they have this incredibly strong graduate student network. There's the engagement, they changed their name, but they used to be the National Outreach Scholarship Conference. What are they now? The Engagement Consortium. Something. Community Engagement.
Engaged Scholarship Consortium.
Yeah, okay. And for years now, they've had as part of their conference the Emerging Engaged Scholars Workshop. Right? And then there are all these other networks you find of these engaged graduate students online. And then you have campuses like Michigan State University that offers a graduate certificate in community engagement. So graduate students in any graduate program can get their degree, and they can get the certificate in community engagement. And the argument there is that this is partly to make them more marketable. Because as a community engaged scholar, you bring a whole bunch of resources in terms of being a better teacher and a different kind of researcher. And we would expect, and there's a question in the Carnegie about this, around recruitment and hiring. So are we doing anything in our hiring to actually attract engaged scholars to our institution? So this is part of a larger system, right? And yeah, there's changes taking place. I would argue that what we're seeing change in graduate school is because of what we talked about much earlier, about changes in the way that we think about generating knowledge. I think about my own campus, right? So I teach in a higher education administration program, and I have colleagues in my program and in public policy and do ed policy, and for years we've taught qualitative and quantitative research methods, right? For the first time we're teaching participatory action research, right? So why? Well, one is that we have a lot of students who really want to do participatory action research projects, and we weren't teaching them how to do it, right? And the other is, why not teach that as a methodology? If we're going to teach, right, qualitative and quantitative research methods, why not teach collaborative research methods? Okay? So, and again, I think you're seeing a lot more of that going on as well. So hopefully that'll shift the pipeline, which means that the faculty that we hire, and I can tell you a lot of the faculty we hire want to do this work. And unless we change as an institution, it's going to be to our detriment. And I'll just leave with one more anecdote, because I know we're probably out of time and I'm probably out of anecdotes. But we did a search on my campus, and again, you know the context of my campus. This is about 3 years ago. A woman of color in the search committee meeting asked exactly the right question. She says, I do participatory action research. Is that valued at this campus? Right? And we're a campus that says we want more diversity in faculty, we really value, right? She didn't come to our campus. The answer was really complicated, right? Now, maybe she didn't come for other reasons, but it certainly didn't encourage her to come to the campus. Right? So then I told that story at another campus, and afterwards, this woman came up afterwards in tears. And she said to me, I asked that question when I was hired here. And they said it was, and it's not. If we want those faculty to come to our campuses and to thrive at our campuses, we're going to need to change. Because either they won't come into the academy or they'll go somewhere else. And if we really want to attract the best faculty, we're going to have to take this engagement work seriously. So I'll leave it then.
So I want to just throw out two very quick things, and this will be what you will get in follow-up emails. So we have 2 sets of work to do as a result of this series, and we can think of it as bottom-up, top-down, perhaps. One is we have this rich experience that many of you have gone through at one level or another and contributed to, and we've had, folks like John and others contribute their time and thinking. And so the first question is, how do we maximize that asset? We will certainly be capturing what's been spoken among us. We have great video, we have slides, and the question then becomes, how do we share with the broader audiences and constituents and peers so that we are instigating the kind of dialogue you've talked about and encouraging the kind of efforts at all levels, including on the ground, that begin to move these things forward in an organic way even. I mean, we can strategize forever, but how do we just get more folks to begin thinking, and how does that fuel the dialogues and networks you're in? One thing to think about. The second is, how do we make sense of what we've learned in a way that, in some collective way, we are able to sort of express broadly, here's what we're thinking about what we ought to be, how we ought to be moving forward, and particularly at Cleveland State, given what we've learned, where we are right now, and what does that look like? So it's sort of 2 different questions. So one, I'm just going to encourage you, since you're here, to send a note, an email, a thought as you think about this on how that is. We have, whether it's the Civic Commons tools and other tools to instigate both of those things, how might we expand the dialogue and do some sense making? I know that one thing we will do at some level is convene people who have been participating, sitting in, to do some of that sense-making work. And we'll figure out the best way to do that that's efficient and constructive, but we will do some of that. So this doesn't end here. We'll continue the work, and most importantly, I hope that you all find ways in your work with colleagues and the things you're doing here on campus, or our friends right down the street or down the highway, to use this in your efforts in many different ways. So thank you again, and John, we really appreciate your time and the things you've shared with us.